The government has injected 175 billion Kenyan shillings into the road sector. And how these funds were obtained is through a process known as securitization. So the government took out 7 shillings out of every 25 shillings that is collected as the road maintenance levy, packaged it as a financial product, then took it to private investors who then gave us 178 billion shillings upfront. This is what I mean. This table shows you how IPRA determines the price for fuel. So in this case, let's look at the super petrol, the price of super petrol. When super petrol lands in the country, it usually goes for 81 shillings and 88 cents. But there are other additional costs like the storage and distribution cost and also the oil marketing margins, which are charged on top of this fuel that has been imported into the country. Now, the government would go ahead and add additional taxes and levies on top of this price for petrol. So some of these levies include the excise duty, which is 21 shillings and 95 cents, the road maintenance levy, which is 25 shillings. Then we have these other levies like the petroleum development levy, the petroleum regulatory levy, the railway development fund. So all these costs, these levies are going to be added on top of the price for fuel. So in this case, talking about super petrol, you can see that we also have excise duty, we have value added tax, and you can see that the total cost when we talk about the government taking their fair share of taxes is around 82 shillings and 33 cents. This is on top of the 81 shillings and 88 cents. So that's why if you're going to buy 1 litre of petrol, it's going to go for 186 shillings and 31 cents. The one that is of particular interest is the road maintenance levy. You can see that it's 25 shillings and it's actually charged to super petrol and diesel and not kerosene. Now 7 shillings out of these 25 shillings is what has been sold to these investors. It's what convinced these 80% international investors and 20% domestic investors. So they own the rights that for the next 7 years, every 7 shillings out of these 25 shillings that is collected by the government has to go to them. That's the repayment plan in short. Now, these funds are being used to fund stalled projects, abandoned projects. They're not meant for new road projects. And you can see that the government is not tapping into the budget because they have a budget allocation for 2025-2026. They're not going to touch that. The government is not going to impose new taxes that are going to be used as avenues for collecting additional revenue that is going to be paid to pay back these contractors. Rather, this is what they have done. They've just sold these rights. Like I said, all stalled projects, you've probably noticed that there are certain roads that are currently under construction in Nairobi and other roads, to be particular, more than 580 abandoned projects are going to be revived using this 175 billion Kenyan shillings. So the government just wants to complete the current or the previous projects that were there, so that the current funds can focus on the current projects. Again, this 175 billion shillings is going to be used, one, to fund these contractors whose payments were delayed. So the actual contractual amount in the contracts that were signed is what is going to be paid. And it has actually been paid. 40% was already paid. The government has also paid an additional 40%. So these bills have been cleared. Only 20% is pending, and it's also going to be cleared in the next 2 weeks. But that's why, like I said, you're seeing current road projects being undertaken in different parts of the country. Apart from being compensated the actual contractual amount, any interest that was incurred because of this delayed payment has also been taken into account. That's why the costs are higher than they should have been had these contractors been compensated back then. And some of these projects date back to 2016. Yeah, 10 years down the line. And part of these funds is also going to be used to compensate the landowners, because some of these projects involved expanding roads and also building new road networks. So those landowners have to be compensated. Now, there have been several concerns that have been raised by Kenyans, and one of them is in terms of the costs, in terms of compensating this, in terms of reviving these old projects, that there are additional costs to that. Like I said, they have to be paid the interest interest for delayed payment. In fact, the government managed to negotiate with them, with some of these contractors, and they managed to offset around 35% of the actual interest. So the government has benefited by 35%, which is the interest that was foregone, but they still have to be compensated in terms of that. So think about the costs. Think about the interest payments that were not necessary had these road investors, or rather had these road contractors been paid back in 2016, in 2018. Also think about the cost of materials. Think about gravel, think about soil, even think about the equipment that is being used to construct these roads, that the prices, the costs have also gone up. So that has to be taken into account as well. So you can see that there's wastefulness in terms of us not finishing up some of the projects that should have been finished before. So that's one of the concerns. The other one is in terms of us selling off these rights. This is the first time that this is happening here in Kenya. And for sure, the 7 shillings out of the 25 shillings is already gone for the next 7 years. So any coming government will have to battle that. Also think about how much Treasury collects from this levy, from this road maintenance levy. That 7 shillings is already out. And if there was any budget or any budgets that are coming up in the next financial years, then we already know that 7 shillings is already foregone, because the rights have been sold. So those are some of the concerns. The other one is in terms of what the Member of Parliament for Kiharu had to say, that is Mr. Ndindi Nyoro. He was talking about how, let me just show you. This table shows you the price for petrol last year. From February to March, March to April, how IPRA sets this price. You can see that around March, the price was supposed to be around 206 shillings and 36 cents. Actually, that was the price for 1 litre of super petrol. You can see that in March, the price went down to around 199 shillings, 199.15. Then in April, it's reduced again to 193.84. In May to June, again, it's reduced to 174.63. So you can see that last year, while the prices for super petrol and fuel in general were going down, these are the global prices, the government went ahead and imposed an additional 7 shillings. Yes, the 7 shillings that has been securitized is the same 7 shillings that was added back then in 2024. So this happened for the financial year 2025, for the financial year 2024-2026. So the price for fuel went up in July to August. You can see that it jumped from 177, that is in June to July. July, it was 177. Then in July, August, it was 188. Now this was after the 7 shillings was added on top. Remember, the road maintenance levy, the one that I've shown you that is 25 shillings, used to be 18 shillings. So 7 shillings was added on top. That's when it came to 25 shillings. And this happened last year. So the point that the Member of Parliament, that is Ndindi Nyoro, was talking about was that Kenyans never got a chance to enjoy the reduction in the fuel price because this 7 shillings was added on top, in as much as the global prices were going down. And the same 7 shillings that was added back then is the same 7 shillings that has been used to securitize this 175 billion shillings loan. In fact, this is what the CS for transport had to say. This was earlier on this year, around April this year, if not in June. So Mr. Davis Chirchir mentioned that, this is quotes, so what we have done with the approval of Parliament, giving us the additional 7 shillings on the Road Maintenance Levy Fund, on top of the current 18 shillings in July last year, was to take a bold decision to securitize the 7 shillings to raise about 175 billion through a bond issuance. By bond issuance, we're talking about this 175 billion that was presented to private investors. So is it a conspiracy that these 7 shillings that was added back then is the same 7 shillings that is currently being used right now to securitize this. So that's the point that the member of parliament was talking about. What do you think? The other major concern is in terms of just securitization, that Kenya is doing this for the first time. So what if the government takes another step and decides to securitize other funds that are specifically meant for a specific fund? For example, think about the social health insurance fund. It's 2.75% of your gross salary, and it's mandatory for anyone who's earning a salary. And it's for sure that if you earn a salary, if you're employed, 2.75% has to go to the social health insurance fund. What if the government does the same thing to these other funds, just like it has done to the road maintenance levy? Think about the housing fund. What if they go ahead and take another loan and use one of these funds, for example, the social health insurance fund, to securitize this loan? You can see that this securitization has set a precedent for the upcoming governments or anyone who's going to be in office, that there's that possibility, that we've opened up a box of possibilities. Even think about the Eurobond, that it was first issued in 2014, and since then, Kenya has been issuing other Eurobonds, in as much as they didn't exist before. So those are some of the concerns that other Kenyans have. What do you think? Do you think it's justifiable for the government to do this? Because with all honesty, road construction, road infrastructure is important to our country. And instead of just coming up with new projects, why not just finish up with the old projects so that you can think ahead of the new projects? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments.